No worries.
All right, welcome back, guys. So welcome to the YouTube channel. My name is Adam, also known as the Plant Power Coach. Today, I'm actually have the privilege and honor to bring you James Alexander-Ellis. I have a little funny story that I'm pretty sure you already know. But James, hi, how are you doing today? Where are you in the world?
Hey, good to see you, Adam. I'm in New Zealand at the moment, in Christchurch, which is on the South Island.
Amazing. So that little funny story I want to mention is that I'll make a long story short. When I first started bodybuilding, I didn't have a posing coach. I couldn't afford a posing coach, and I knew how important it was. And I went onto YouTube and I started searching like posing routines for bodybuilding, for like these sorts of things. And the person whose name that kept coming up was James Alexander-Ellis. So I started following you like religiously and doing all your poses and taking all your advice, even like watching your workout videos as well. And yeah, so I was kind of really inspired, followed you on Instagram, everything. And then when I moved to the UK, guess who was the PT manager of the gym that I just got a job at? James Alexander-Ellis. So long story short, it was huge for me. It was like a very very coincidental, but I'm really honored to have you here today. So I guess first things first, for anyone who doesn't know you as well as I do, I know you've got hundreds of thousands of followers. Tell us a little bit about who you are, James, and how we got here today.
Yeah, I mean, I guess who I used to be is the most relevant thing.
Yeah.
And I got really lucky. I got into the industry at a time when social media was still quite new, and it was one of those times where you could build a big following and go very global and very viral very quickly. So I think it was around about 2010, 2011, I started doing like a couple of modeling shoots. I'd just become a personal trainer, so I was like mega obsessed about bodybuilding. I was very like egocentric and very image conscious, and obviously we all still are to an extent. And I just kind of I amassed a big reputation locally in my gym, and I started competing, and I had people coming to visit me from all over the country. And then I moved to London to try and expand my business. And yeah, I just like it was a whirlwind, and I did well in my competitions. And I think I was kind of on that initial bandwagon where doing a fitness comp was still kind of unusual, unlike now when it's quite commonplace. So not everybody was doing a fitness show back in 2012. So the fact that I'd done a big one and I'd won and I'd gone to America and I'd won that one, it was just a bit of a whirlwind. And I was on YouTube videos. And so that basically made me successful with my business as well, because there was a big spin off from my
Mhm.
social media acclaim to the kind of clients I was getting, the kind of inquiries I was getting. So I had a really amazing few years, and I based my whole life was all about bodybuilding and getting in shape and competing. It was all a lot of fun. And yeah, I kind of retired from all that eventually and just went full time into my coaching. And that's where I am now.
Perfect. I really love that story. One of the things, obviously, as you can imagine, this my YouTube channel is called Plant Power Coach into the Plant Power
Mm,
Academy. As you can imagine, Plant Power, I tried to kind of use a couple of words related to veganism, a lot of words related to fitness. So considering that this
mm.
page is about fitness, is about veganism, could you share your thoughts and understanding and philosophy of each of those? Like, what's your understanding of veganism? What's your understanding of fitness? And how do you tie those things
Mm.
together if you do?
Yeah, I mean, veganism for me means, the practice of living without animal products in your life. It's
Mhm.
not just about diets. It's about having a whole philosophy, and I think it should stem from an ecological care and understanding. And I'll touch on this in a minute because my experience of veganism was more selfishly based, and I had a good time. But I think true veganism is has a holistic mindset around it and care for animals and stuff. And then, fitness. I was very lucky that when I was taught as a young personal trainer, well, actually not young, but 10 years, 12 years ago, when I learned to be a personal trainer, I did a course. They very much teach you that fitness is an umbrella term for a whole host of different things. So fitness has always been for me about cardiovascular fitness and strength and mobility
Mhm.
and health. So I've always been interested in that. And even when I was a bodybuilder and I was taking things very seriously, and I was outwardly just looking at my veins the whole time, I was still very interested in being fit and functional. I think that
Mhm.
reflects in how I train. So I've always been interested in the ecosystem of fitness rather than just thinking that it means going and being good at doing a marathon.
Mm. I really like that one. I truly believe that as well, because so one thing that we teach in our academy is like the three pillars, or the umbrella term for
Mm,
fitness. So fitness is the umbrella term for
mm,
three pillars, which is health, physique,
mm,
and performance. And no matter
mm,
who we speak to, we know that their goal is going to fall in under one of those three, or it could be multiple.
mm,
But so yeah, it's really
mm.
good because like even I take this class on the weekends as well. And sometimes, I tell people at the beginning of the class is like, we're here to share our goals and stuff like that. If you say I want to get fit, I'm going to ask you what fit means to you, because people
Mm.
just want to say I want to get fit, and it's like, okay, that means different things. So
Yes,
yeah, I
definitely.
really like that, you've expanded on what, fitness is to you. So yeah, I had this questions prepared because I obviously had some understanding that you were plant-based, but also just before we hit the record button,
Mm,
you mentioned about not being plant-based anymore. As far as I
mm.
understand, you were plant-based for a while. When I met
Yeah,
you, you were eating mostly keto, as far as I can remember as well.
yeah,
Can you
yeah.
explain to me how you got from there to here, considering they're practically opposites?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, my story is probably very unique. I mean, I'm sure everybody thinks that their story is unique, but mine's quite unusual because I've come from a background where I've been like really into the aesthetic side of bodybuilding. When I've competed, I've followed lots of very extreme calorie restriction and macronutrient restricting diets, mostly keto dieting. I was a huge fan of keto diet for many years. I was probably at the more extreme end. So I would stay low carb for weeks and weeks at a time. I wouldn't do like refeeds and I wouldn't fall off the wagon, mostly because I was laser focused on getting my body fat down. And I didn't preach it too hard. I wasn't like one of those trainers that made all my clients go on a keto diet, but I certainly would encourage it if people were interested because it was something I was interested in myself. And I think that after a while, I got into cycling, and you probably know this because
Mm,
back when we were starting to hang out, I was starting to get interested in cycling as a way of retiring from bodybuilding. I needed another thing
mm,
to do that made me happy and healthy, and something else that I could obsess about, if I'm honest. So
mhm,
cycling became something that I got into. I love the like material side of sexy equipment. You know, if you obsess about fast cars and you like road bikes or mountain bikes, you kind of get the same obsession about the technology and
mm,
the shiny objects. You know, middle-aged men love buying shiny objects. So when I got into cycling, it's fairly obvious that like most your kind of endurance athletes don't eat a low carb diet. Although there are some that do, it's really small percentage. So my cycling community kind of was saying to me, come on, you should probably move to more of a high carb diet. Just around about the same time, I started dating my current girlfriend, and she was vegetarian, verging on plant-based.
mm.
And we basically ended up dating because she was my client. Probably shouldn't admit that publicly, but she was my coach. I was her coach for a while, and we kind of ended up in a relationship. Never done that before, I promise. So basically, what happened is she was fully plant-based. I was going around to her house, and she was like, "Oh, hey, why don't I cook dinner for night? Would you like to try a plant-based version of whatever meal you want?" Because she's quite a fancy fancy chef. So I basically said, yeah, yeah, like whatever, like in the honeymoon period, you just do whatever you and your girlfriend says, right? Yeah, I'll eat whatever you say, babe. It's amazing. And she delivered all these incredible variations of meals that I was used to having. So Indian food, she'd do plant-based version, Thai food, plant-based version. She'd make me like spaghetti bolognese, plant-based version. I was like, wow, this is incredible. So basically, within a few weeks, I was like, do you know what? Why don't we just do this full time? And she was like, yes, let's do it. So I went from slowly moving away from keto to eating a high carb, totally plant based diet. And that's so it was her influence and it was the influence of cycling. And it was
Mm.
probably just because I was getting a bit more open minded. That's how I got into it.
Yeah. So to expand on that as well, you mentioned also you're no longer plant-based. How did you get from, let's say, that third step? You've gone keto, plant-based, and then what's happening now?
I think what plant based dieting did for me is it broke me out of an obsession about I think it broke me out of disordered eating, weirdly. I approached plant-based dieting maybe in
Yep.
a slightly disordered way
Yep.
because it was almost swinging the opposite. It was going from excluding carbohydrates to excluding animal products.
Mm.
But they were done, it was done, I guess it was a bit different. I spent a good year to year and a half being almost completely plant-based. Now, I was one of those plant-based dieters, and I hope none of your viewers or yourself hate me for this, but I wasn't doing it for ecological reasons. And I respected more the people that did. I was doing it because I wanted to explore a new way to be healthy. I wanted to try a new, because I've always obsessed about things. So I'm like 100% in or I'm not in at all.
Yep.
And I think plant-based for me was a really good way to go 100% in on what happens to my health if I generally explore a whole new macro split. I'm gonna, take out certain amino acids and have more of others and that kind of thing. So I entered it maybe not from a purist perspective, but I did really enjoy it, and I found it quite easy to stay lean. In fact, I think I got a little bit leaner just by changing around my food types and
Mm.
moving away from animal products. Also, my bike performance was definitely not hampered. And I was like, I wasn't sure if it was going to have a positive or a negative effect, but I think I was at my lightest and leanest and fittest as an endurance athlete, certainly, maybe
Mm.
not as a bodybuilder. I think plant-based dieting gave me that. The reason we moved away from it is we moved to New Zealand 9 months ago. And if I'm honest, being a bit lazy, it's harder to find a lot of the products that we were used to in London. You go
Yep.
shopping in London, you've got every single plant-based product in every shop.
Yep.
And in New Zealand, you probably have about half as much of a
Yep.
choice in all of the main supermarkets. And because we were busy settling and we were busy kind of exploring like new cuisines and stuff, it just became something that we sort of forgot about,
Yep.
embarrassed to say. Also, one other thing to add is cuisine in New Zealand. New Zealand is like they're devoutly local with a lot of their stuff. And I know it's not the same, especially to someone that doesn't want to be harming animals, but maybe in this country, they think the people that eat animal products, it's like it's a proud dairy country, it's a proud kind of beef
Yep.
country. So it's almost like it's easier to eat animal products and maybe perceive that you're being like more environmentally friendly because everything's kind of kept within the four
Yep.
walls of the country. So yeah, I think we justified it like that.
One of the things, like a bit of a side note here, is I truly appreciate, the terminology that you're using is very accurate to a lot of people. Even on these sort of YouTube calls and stuff, I've spoken to people like, I used to be vegan, and that to me just sounds very strange.
Mm,
At the very
mm,
most, I would say that this person used to be plant-based, because a lot of the reasoning is like
mm,
what you said. It's for those health aspects, and I don't think anyone who, especially in the fitness industry, has a real issue with that. Yeah, so I really like the fact that you're saying, I used to be plant-based, I used to be keto, and like you said, it's all related to the health aspect. There are people who are in the plant, who are consuming plant-based, who still have conversations with vegans because of the ethicals and moral ties to it as well. So that's a bit of a side note, which is, I think, a really good thing to point out. You've kind of mentioned, you've touched on slightly the sort of my next question. Why is it you're not bodybuilding anymore? I kind of want to expand on that. I know you're cycling a lot.
mm. Yeah, I mean, I think broadly speaking, bodybuilding was a long obsession for me, probably the longest kind of hobby I've ever had, something that spawned into like a whole business for me. And I was really lucky and I think I benefited from it. And, I took bodybuilding very seriously to the point where I was competing and taking steroids liberally. And I
Yep.
have no regrets about any of that stuff because I couldn't have been so successful with my competing if I hadn't taken performance enhancing drugs.
Yep.
So they went hand in hand, and I've got a lot of positive memories. And I don't really have, I never had the negative health stuff that I don't think a lot of bodybuilders can get. And I don't think it really, I don't think it affected my mental health either, but it certainly did consume me a lot. Excuse me. It did consume me for a while. And I think that I just became, I'm one of these very rational people. I find it very easy to step back from things and assess if they're going to serve me for very long. And if they're not
Hmm.
going to serve me long term, I'll pull away from them because I'm protecting my future self. And I think that because bodybuilding was very all or nothing and it was very consuming, um, I guess you just get to a point where, like, I was at my peak of competing when I was 38, and that's quite late. And actually, the guys I was competing with were in their like late 30s. I think AJ was in his early 40s.
Mm.
Wole was a similar age to me. I was just kind of always stepping back, thinking, okay, how much longer can I keep going with this? And the main thing that put me off was that it wasn't really about the health elements. It was that I could see that I wasn't being as present in my business as I should be. For someone that has great business opportunity because
Mm,
of my global reach with my social media, I thought, I'm not really making the best of my business here. I'm not helping as many people as I can. And the more people you help, the more you get paid. So there's this, as you know, as a coach, there's this symbiosis between being good at your job and helping people and accumulating wealth. And so I was just like, nah, I need to pull away from this. So my version of bodybuilding is training in the gym like 3 times a week and
mm.
not taking it that seriously. Like I want to look good, but I'm more interested in kind of maintaining what I've got and also spending 6 hours a day at my computer as well. So I can't be too obsessed about my gym stuff.
Yeah, when I came up with these questions, I was thinking to myself, what would the viewers want to know? Like, what are the people who are big
Mm,
fans of yourself, like me, want to know? And
mm,
I think the big one
mm.
was that. It's like, why did you want to leave bodybuilding? And I truly love
Yeah.
that answer as well, because I feel like nowadays, I mean, your sort of experience with PEDs sounds like it was quite on the positive side, but even
Mm,
nowadays, you're hearing about, even someone that we both knew somewhat, well, you knew him personally. I'd seen him compete on
mm,
stage, for whatever reasons related to PEDs or not. Bodybuilding is
mm,
quite a strenuous, difficult sport to sustain over a
mm,
long period of time, even if you do
mm.
have a whole team behind you. So
Yeah.
that's what I think anyway.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
for sure.
I guess like we touched on the plant-based side, bodybuilding side of as well. A lot of people talk to me about this sort of channel and what it's about. It sounds a bit weird, but this is my sort of form of activism, and it's my form of activism
Mm,
towards veganism.
mm,
For me, I have no doubt in my mind being plant-based or the environmental aspect are great things that come attached to going vegan. For me, it's all about sort of the injustice towards animals, as you've already mentioned, as you've kind of touched on. I'm curious. I mean, the answer can be as long as you want it to be. What would it take for you to consider understand, like being on the same page as what I believe in? What would it take for you? Is it kind of like seeing footage of what happens in an abattoir? Is it seeing like what would it take for you
mm.
to go vegan? Essentially, that's the short answer, short question.
Yeah, I think it's different. Like for me, because I've always come to it without the kind of from not from the moral standpoint,
Hmm.
and I think because I've been sheltered from the horrors of the animal product industry,
Yep.
and I know that a lot of people respond to seeing images and being educated about what goes on, and I think the problem is that most of society I think someone that's plant-based knows that if people were educated more regularly and saw more images of the unpleasant
Mm.
stuff that goes on, that would work and it would turn more people away from plant-based products. But what happens is people object if you expose them to that. They go, "Why are you showing me this? This is disgusting. This isn't the way to like." It's a bit like saying, "Well, what is going to work then?" Like,
Yeah.
because people object, but you go, "Well, surely it's for the best." So you almost can't win if you're being an activist. You can't win with that approach.
Mm.
So it's a very good question. I think for me, it would be it's simple things like if I had more access to the products that because the stuff you'll appreciate this. The things that got me quickly into plant-based diet were some of the convenient replacement products, so I
Hmm.
could be eased into it. And I'm sure you hear this a lot. And it was things like getting kind of plant-based cheeses and plant-based milks and
Yep.
plant-based kind of meat patties.
Yep.
I don't appreciate it. You've got different types of vegans, right? You've got the people that go, oh, don't eat those processed products. They're just as bad for you. In fact, that's mostly meat eaters would say that. You might as
Hmm.
well eat meat because that product has got 100 ingredients in it. And I'm like, yeah, but I don't care because I'm trying to eat differently. Like, don't shit on my
Mm.
new hobby because you don't like the convenience you don't like the chemicals. But for me, those things really helped me embrace a new way of eating.
Mm.
And so I think for me, it was the convenience and the availability and the food technology, thanks to some of these, obviously, these big multi-billion pound food companies that are cashing in on this trend. I think if I had a little bit more access to that, that would be the main thing. And then secondary to that, if I was exposed to more visual shock and horror, I think that would push me in that direction.
Okay. Okay. If I understood correctly, a lot of it has to do with accessibility, particularly on the other side
Yeah,
of the world, which is ironically where I kind of came from. Yep.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, New
Gotcha.
Zealand is not a good place for having access to everything. Everything has to be imported. A lot of people that are watching this may not know we don't really have eBay or Amazon. The two things that I've spent my adult life buying things from and shopping on daily. We've got this kind of daily Amazon purchase that a lot of people do. You don't get that in New Zealand, so you have to find other ways to buy things. They're either local or you paying shipping for things to come over from Australia.
Yeah. I guess to kind of give a bit of pushback to that question, because I know you're very
Mm,
open-minded. I know you're open to
mm,
kind of being challenged as well. I think I've challenged you
mm,
before in the past as well. I
mm.
guess
No, yeah, definitely.
if I was an activist on the street and I kind of had this stall up and I was showing abattoir footage and stuff, and they've essentially got a script. There's a kind of way to go about it, and the general kind of approach is to say, hey, look, well, how do you feel about this? And then like the common answer is like, this is horrible. I don't want to see it. And it sounds like you're on the same sort of page of that.
Mm,
The next question is like, what kind of things can we do to stop it? In your case, it could be like your response is somewhere along the lines of, if I had more accessibility, how would you feel with the pushback from someone saying like, but what about the animals? Like, how would you feel about that?
mm.
Like, it sounds like it's a slight inconvenience for you from a convenience point, for like having accessibility. But how would the pushback sound to you if it was just like, but what about the animals? How would you process that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I've never really been challenged in that way. I mean, you were probably more devout of you when I first met you, you were more challenging, I think, probably than maybe you are now. And that's your viewers are going to think, well, what do you mean? So the Adam that I met was quite loudly plant-based, and you were quite pushy on it, which I think a lot of people around you, we weren't used to that so much because the plant-based trend in the fitness industry was very new. So you were probably the first person I met that was a plant-based weightlifter. And so you were quite loud about it, which I think ruffled a few people's feathers. And you can be proud about that now because years later you're still passing the same message on, but you probably do it a bit more intelligently. I haven't really been challenged about it. I don't think it would really make any difference. I think it's weird because I'm describing a situation that I've said is an issue already. It's a bit like you can challenge people, but then you kind of annoy them. So at which point do you decide to just let people
Mm,
come towards that direction? And so it's very hard, I think. Um, yeah, for me, it's like I think part of my interest in being plant-based. So the thing for me would be if someone said, you know, it's about challenging norms. That's more interesting for me. It's still not about the animals.
mm,
To me, the interest in doing this, it's the activism side of it interests me. And going against cultural norms, which is why do we eat so much beef? We can get protein elsewhere. Why is McDonald's the biggest fucking beef producer in the world? All this stuff, when you put it on paper, it's quite perverse and quite weird. And it's like, do you want to be one of these like average Joe, normal people that dies of a heart attack? That's the angle that interests me is going against the grain and it's being counterculture.
mm.
Because although plant-based living is popular, it's still not the biggest force in the world, and animal products are still rampaging everywhere. So to me, the challenge there is it's more about can you make a difference? Can you go against the grain? For some reason, the animal thing it doesn't flick my switches on. I don't know. I think I'm just a bad person.
No, yeah, no, it's an interesting point. First of all, with the point about my level of activism now, it's an interesting point because I get told that I used to be more chilled and now now I'm a bit more of an activist. So
Ah,
that's a very interesting answer. I'm happy to take the heat for both of them. You mentioned a few things there, like plant-based vegan. To me, they're two completely different things. For me,
yeah.
I mean, I use this example again. A lot of people, when I use this example, they go, "That's a very extreme example," but this is my sort of
Mm,
stance on it. Veganism and plant-based is like saying, um, I'm I'm against slavery for the economy.
mm,
That
mm,
to me is just like it's an irrelevant point. Whether slavery helps the economy or doesn't help the economy, it's a moot point essentially for me. So
mm, mm,
people who go vegan for plant-based for like, I mean, people who are vegan for this reason, that reason, in my opinion, based on the definition of the vegansociety.com, is the is
mm,
it's all about the injustice towards animals. So,
mm,
talking about the diet aspect is great, but like, someone who eats a particularly healthy vegan diet, which I consider myself to be one of them, versus someone who is just eating French fries and Oreos and whatever. We're in the
Yes,
same
Oreos.
sort. I consider us our level of, I guess, let's say a clone of myself, clone of me doing
Mm,
exactly the same life. One eats French fries and Oreos, and one eats predominantly plant-based, healthy
mm,
diet. In
mm,
my opinion, morals and ethic wise, they're both the same, right?
mm.
Now, I that to some people might sound like, oh, you think vegans are better than everyone else. I don't think vegans are better than other people, but I do think killing, not killing is better than killing. And
Yes.
providing supply and demand on that. So yeah, yeah, I guess kind of one of the things that the reason I got this question is a very scientific question, and it has to do with like debates within any sort of scientific argument or with any sort of evidence-based argument. The One of the most common questions from the, I guess, the scientist who kind of has one up the other scientist is, what evidence would I have to provide to get you
Mm.
to change your mind on the position? And I guess that's kind of what I'm trying to get at with this. So it's like you mentioned a bit like maybe more footage to the abattoir, maybe more accessibility. So that, I mean, is there anything else you want to add to that, or have you kind of covered that?
I think the average person, which I don't consider myself to be, the average person, maybe someone that's not in the fitness industry, maybe needs to see more of that stuff. I think that kind of shock footage carries a lot of weight. I know
Mm,
that's a traditional method for delivering the message. I think for people in the fitness industry, what was, as you know, very potent was the documentary that everybody watched, the one that James Cameron was involved in. Remind
yeah.
me of the name.
Check Game Changers.
Yeah, yeah, that had a temporary impact on me. I
Yep.
wasn't sold on all of the science because it is a little bit sensationalized. But then I watched it and I thought, you know what? This is a Netflix program. It's
Mm,
always sensationalized, and if it is sensationalized to achieve a result, like you said, if it moves people towards not killing animals, it doesn't really matter how they got there
mm,
or why they do it. It's just better. So the game changers, I thought, was a really good way of starting to catch a certain person's attention and go, oh, actually, have you thought about the types of fats that you're eating? And have you thought about the fact that maybe we can get protein from other sources? I think it was really disruptive. And I think something like that is a good example of
mm.
I mean, probably like yourself, when that program came out, within 24 hours, most of my clients had texted me about it and said, oh, have you seen this thing? And what do you
Yep.
think about it? And I was like, I was kind of annoyed that someone could be so influential on my entire client base. But hey, that's the power of
Yeah.
TV. So I think that's a good example of a way we can try and get more people to do the right thing. Because I think it is the right thing to eat less animal products or no animal products.
Yeah.
I just think that at the moment, that kind of message just hasn't permeated through enough people. And it's still too damn convenient to go and grab a burger if you want to snack.
What if it like have you watched documentaries like Dominions and stuff like those sorts of documentaries? I think they're on
Oh,
Netflix as well.
no, I haven't, but yeah. I mean, I've seen a whole bunch of the kind of like the beef ones, and
Yeah.
they're all kind of unpleasant to watch.
Mm,
They all have a fairly similar narrative, whereas Game Changers was refreshing because it was stimulating and it's just kind of controversial in a different way. The whole thing of like showing the strong man. I know there's a lot of kind of bending data to suit the program, but they've got the whole, hey, there's a strong man here and he eats plant-based. So you can all be strong if you eat plant-based. I know that that argument's a bit weak, but actually it would have certainly influenced a hell of a lot of people if it was watched by like a billion people. So
yeah, I mean, like just to be clear, Dominion is not about fitness or health or anything. It's about what happens in
oh
the animal
yeah,
industry. So it's just clear because you mentioned,
oh
if there were
sounds
more
dark.
documentaries like that. Yeah, I mean, it's just that's kind of like, I think I really like the Game Changers, mostly because it just shows people that it's possible. I think the only kind of real argument
Mm,
people have is that, oh, but what about my protein? Not that it is an argument, but it's
mm,
just like they're
mm,
genuinely people. If people are like, if I can get my protein, I'll go vegan. But then there's other people who just
mm,
kind of use it as a way to, I know better than you, which is not
mm,
not going to be
mm,
true. Um, but yeah, no,
mm.
that's a really good point.
I've
I
got one thing to add that I think you'll appreciate, which I haven't said already, which I
go
think
for it.
your
Yeah.
viewers will appreciate. I was definitely, in terms of grams of protein per day, I was definitely way lower the whole time I was plant-based, and it made no effect to my muscle mass. And I don't get to say this publicly because when I'd gone plant-based, I didn't really talk about it because I
Mm,
was just doing it for personal things. I was I mean, I've obviously spent most of my adult life having like 250 grams of animal protein. I reckon when I was plant-based, I was 150 or below, probably closer to 100 on some days.
Mm.
And I didn't lose any muscle, and I was training slightly less as well. So there was lots of factors that might have contributed, but considering I was bodybuilding a bit less and I was eating way less protein, there was no noticeable atrophy to
Yep.
my body. And that was one thing that I would always look back and go, okay, you've got the whole thing like the protein myth generally, but
Yep.
it's clear that animal plant-based sources are pretty adequate.
I don't know, I'm not going to mention his name, but there was a really big guy at the gym that we both know. And he used to message me about being vegan. He was like trying to give me lots of shit. And at one point, he's like, "Oh, plants don't have all amino acids." I'm like, "Yes, they do.
Yeah,
I'm happy to
yeah.
prove it to you." So, and then he just like, there's no way you can get like full amino acid profile from a carrot. So I sent him actually a screenshot of a steak and the amino acid profile, but I removed the word steak on
Mm,
purpose and I sent it
mm,
across to him. And he
mm,
goes, "See, look, I told you it's not a full profile amino acid." I'm like, "It's funny you say that because this is a steak." And I actually caught him out
mm,
on that, and then he just stopped messaging me for a bit.
mm.
But it was an interesting fact. So yeah, myth number one: proteins don't have all amino acids. And fun fact is that protein originates from plants. So it's kind of like
Yeah, yeah,
the main
exactly. It
source.
starts in the ground, doesn't it? So,
Exactly. I've got one more question for you
I
before
think,
we've. Oh,
yeah,
sorry.
yeah.
Go on. Go on. No, you were saying.
No, I was going to say my personal best because I love the idea that more people would eat plant-based, having been into it for so long. My best the best example I think because it's very visual is I tell people about what do these like fucking big muscly gorillas eat? They just spend the whole days eating plants, and look how incredibly ridiculously strong and overwhelming a silverback gorilla is. They would just crush your skull with like one tiny flick. And I'm like, have you seen what these guys are eating? And they're like, oh yeah, okay. So it's just not as simple.
Mm,
The physiology of animals and humans and how we process nutrients and then what happens to our body is much more complicated than just like
mm,
it's a bit like saying that calories in, calories out is the only thing that matters. If you're saying that like protein in and muscle out is that simple, but
mm.
the silverback gorilla disproves that.
Absolutely. And that's a very, very good point. And considering they're very close ancestors of us, it has to play a large role, more than a lion, which is the common argument anyway.
Mm, mm,
Um, so I've got this. This is a long question, and I kind of want you to process this. So I'm going to kind of read it
mm.
slowly. If you could go back and talk to your younger self, or potentially someone who just reminds you of you, what would you say to them based on everything we've discussed today, or from what you know now?
Oh, specifically about the plant-based stuff.
Everything related to veganism, plant-based, plant-based fitness, that sort of what we've spoken about today, or
Yeah,
anything you know. Yeah.
I think I would talk to the impressionable young like bodybuilder that was me in my 20s, and although I eventually like realized all my success much later, these the thoughts and aspirations were in my head from a very young age, like a lot of people that get into the gym. I think I would warn of the obsession with kind of orthorexic eating patterns, and I would
Mm,
suggest to people in advance that um, the gains that you see from these more orthorexic eating patterns are correlative, not causative. I ate a keto diet religiously and I got lean from it, but like I probably could have done that from a higher carb diet. It was just that, and this leads me on to maybe how coaches, good coaches, deal with their clients. It's important that we are able to stick and be adherent with our diet plan.
mhm,
So if we're in a calorie deficit, it probably doesn't really matter physiologically speaking, where the deficit comes from and what macronutrient might be reduced. It's more about being able to stick to the diet and enjoy it, and maybe if it's part of your tribe or your community. And so I think that if young bodybuilders are educated, that yeah, fine, stick to some rigid eating pattern if you want, but understand that it's probably not the like magic bullet that you think. It's probably something else that's making that work. And I think the same thing with plant-based eating is that plant-based eating might be something that people just explore for a little while. And they think, like for example, a lot of people might think, okay, I went plant-based and I got in better shape or better health from like not eating animal products. You could even say, hey, look, maybe eating more plants generally got you in better shape. Maybe it wasn't just reducing the animal products, as beneficial as that is. I think it's looking at the mechanism of eating and taking a step back from it and taking a step back from the stuff that the media shows us, the
Mhm.
removal parts, and think actually maybe it's the fact that you included something else, or maybe it's the fact that it helped you be more adherent. And I think that if trainees are more educated
Yeah.
about the reality of what they're doing, I think it'll just help them moving forwards, and it'll stop people getting stuck in disordered eating patterns. And also teaching it to other people, because a lot of coaches are very, I mean, I'll forgive you because your stick that you hit people with is a very noble one, but people are doing the same thing with all sorts of unusual disordered eating patterns,
Mm.
and you hear people pushing, oh, don't eat keto, it's bad for you. It's like, just let people eat what they want. You need to tell us what's bad for us.
Mm.
Or, do eat keto because it's the only way to get lean. It's like, well, don't use
Yeah.
that message. So yeah, I hope that makes sense.
That makes sense. Look, James, we're running out of time here, and we've got 1 more minute on here. I'm going
Yep.
to leave a description down the bottom with all your information, all the details in there as well. Anyone who's watching this as well, please, please, please go follow James. He's got over 200,000 followers. Great, makes some great content. And if you're considering someone for fat loss and for fat loss coaching, please speak to James. He's honestly so. I mean, you've probably got it from this video already. He's super smart, so he knows a lot about what he's talking about. So thank you so much for your time today, James. I really appreciate it, and
Thanks, Alan.
I hope to let this video share this video, and I'll see you out there, mate. Take care.
Nice one. Thanks, guys. Cheers.
Thanks, James.
All right.